Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we're going to be doing another anime review. I guess it's not anime, I'm not exactly sure. It's a web animation, it's on Netflix. It's a kind of animated series, but I don't necessarily know if it's anime specifically or if it's just Western animation. So what I'm talking about is Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy. It's a three sets of 6 episodes that are supposed to be watched in, not necessarily in one go, but they're all a series that are one series divided into 3 parts. The first one being Siege, the second one being Earthrise, and the third one being Kingdoms. So this is Transformers Cybertron, or War for Cybertron. And as far as I can tell, it seems to be like a retelling of G1 plus Beast Wars in some sort of ways. I watched G1 a long time ago. I watched Beast Wars a long time ago as well. I don't remember too much about them. Mostly, I remember a lot of Transformers Prime. I remember a lot of Transformers movies. I don't really remember too much about the earlier stuff, even though I watched a lot of it. I watched G1, Beast Wars, whatever was after Beast Wars. And then I remember reading a bit of the Transformers Energon series. I watched Prime. I watched whatever was before Prime as well. And I watched, I've seen a lot of Transformers in my lifetime. I've enjoyed a lot of Transformers stuff in my lifetime. And this one was an interesting kind of look at Transformers from a different lens. This is a little bit more adult-oriented. And it was good. So the director is Takashi Kame. It seems to be that this is a lot of Japanese people are involved with this series, but the writers of it are F.J. DeSanto and George Christic. I can't remember how to say their name, but these two guys wrote the series, and then mostly everyone else that worked on this were Japanese, or at least had Japanese names, and it's really interesting. I mean, Transformers is a Japanese IP from way back in the day, since, Japan has a lot of mecha kind of titles and things, and eventually they brought it over to the US. I think it was, one of the companies that sells toys nowadays. I can't remember which one, but they brought it over to the US, and, they combined it with G.I. Joe and all these other series in order to make this kind of like environment of toys and shows that sold each other, which is interesting. It's very similar to what happened with like Thundercats back in the day. So it's kind of in the same vibe style, right? And Transformers War for Cybertron is split up into 3 segments, like I said. And the first one is Siege. So I'm going to talk about each segment as it is. I didn't really write this out as in a plot, characters, world building, art, rating kind of thing like I usually do for other things. This is more just kind of loose. So, it's going to be a little bit rambly here and there. But so Siege is the introduction to the series. It follows Optimus Prime in his early days as the leader of the Autobots. At least that's what it seems like. Technically speaking, these robots are basically able to live on for infinite amount of times as long as they don't get their sparks removed, or they run out of energon. I think even if they run out of energon, they can revive. I'm not exactly sure, but it seems like it's the early days of Optimus's leadership. He is there, and there's a lot of Autobots, like a lot of Autobots, like a lot more than usual, right? In the movies, it's like 5 Autobots at a time. Now, in this one, there's Wheeljack, RC, Alita. I actually don't remember Alita from anything beforehand. I'm sure she was around, but I don't remember her being in anything. What was the other one? Prowl, Hotshot, Red Alert, Ratchet shows up at one point. There's a bunch of people. Ironhide in his red version, which is cool. And, they're basically freedom fighters. They're rebellion, people, but they are on the losing side because basically Megatron owns all of Cybertron at this point, and they're desperately searching for Energon because they're running out. Their reserves are really low. It's basically if humans were running out of food and water and they're battling a battle of attrition, they were kind of losing, right? It's the same idea. And Megatron is, kind of hunting them down. This is very much G1 inspired. All of the designs look very similar to G1. It's very, very cool. I like it a lot. And it's like cel-shaded CGI, basically. It's really, really interesting looking. And there's a lot of bots I don't know or remember, but a lot of the story is really interesting. Bumblebee actually isn't even an Autobot at this point. He's just kind of this unaffiliated Energon scavenger. He's this guy, running around trying to figure out what's going on. In order to get Energon and sell it to the highest bidder. There's also this guy called Jetfire, who, if you remember correctly from the movies, he's this old jet guy. He's an old jet, and he's a guy. And he was a Decepticon. We get to see him go from Decepticon to Autobot in the series, and his voice changes slightly from this very kind of grainy, ugly sounding voice into a slightly more heroic sounding voice when he transitions into being an Autobot. I thought that was fun and kind of cool. And we get to learn a lot about Alpha Trion, who is basically this the Mr. Miyagi of Transformers. He's this old guy who used to be Optimus and Megatron's teacher, their leader, and they're trying to change the ways of Cybertron, kind of remove this stigma that was put on the Decepticons. Apparently they're two different races, they're not just affiliations of robots. And they were trying to create a new revolution. They were trying to change things for the better. However, Megatron became this, dictator, tyrannical guy, and so Optimus had to step in and kind of fight him, right? And overall, it was good. It wasn't really the best. The first part of the story, Siege, was interesting, but it wasn't my favorite. A lot of it was really cool, but I think that they were still trying to figure out the animation for this part. And so sometimes it felt really clunky, more clunky than a robot should be, right? Or at least these sentient robots should be. But it was cool. It was overall very, very interesting. So I quite liked it. I kept going and watching the next one. And Earthrise was a lot better, at least in how everything looked. Some of the plot lines were not my favorite. Optimus Prime basically was really dumb in this one, more so than you would think he should be. But he seems more dumb in this one specifically compared to the other two parts of the story. And I think that's because there's certain things were required to happen, and in order for them to happen, Optimus could not be Optimus Prime in his prime. He had to be a little bit dumber, and so they decided to make that happen. And it kind of made it worse sometimes, but also there's a lot more intrigue here. There was these moments where they're fighting this thing called the Quintesson, and then this Brokenog shows up, which is the scorpion guy from the first movie. And then they end up in the dead universe, whatever that is. It's kind of like the negative zone, the ghost zone, whatever Zod is supposed to be in Superman. It's kind of that kind of same thing. They meet a bunch of other people. We get to see this evil Bumblebee guy, which is funny. And the problem with this part was actually not the character development necessarily, although the character development for Optimus Prime was pretty bad. It's that this part of the story felt like it could have been a lot longer than it was. Everything was supposed to be 6 chapters each, and this one felt like it could have gone on for 10 or 12 or maybe more. Sometimes it felt like there was a lot of lack of build-up, or things would go from one part to the other really, really quickly with just a little bit of a scene shift, and it was okay, well, I guess it worked, but there's things that could have happened. There were situations that could have been developed a lot more. So that's kind of just that's kind of the bad parts, but the interest I had in the story really developed in this part. So I like that. Eventually they end up on Earth for Beast Wars, which is the third part. And so Kingdom is actually the best one. I think it was the most well set up in terms of what the point of the story was. It was basically very well self-contained in itself, and it had the best animation in my opinion. Basically, they all crash onto Earth, both the Autobots and Decepticons. The Autobots end up meeting the Maximals, and the Decepticons meet the what do they call it? The Protocons. And they realize that the future of Cybertron is bleak without the Allspark, because Optimus Prime took it off-world at the end of Siege, and then Megatron was chasing him for all of Earthrise, right? So that happens, they meet, and then it turns out that the Protocons are led by Megatron. Now, this Megatron is actually not the original. It is a descendant of Megatron. It is someone that took his name in order to be like him, and he shows them that there's this disc that tells him the future, right? And so Megatron listens to it, and he gets kind of obsessed with his own might and with not losing, because in Earthrise they met Galvatron and Unicron as well. And so, situations happen, stuff, goes awry, and then Maximals and the Autobots join in, and they fight against the Decepticons and the Predacons, and eventually there is a big climactic battle that ends well, and eventually, the situation is settled for now, which of course it has to be, because there is no way that, that they'll kill Megatron, because then there is no further Autobot story, right? So, yeah, overall, it was really, really cool, really interesting. The problem with the series as a whole, with all 3 parts, is that sometimes it needed to breathe, and sometimes it needed to tighten up, because there's some parts that bored me. Like, there's this whole part with this guy called Sky Lynx, which was this kind of like, I don't know, like, he was a dinosaur for some reason, even though he looked like a jet. So he's a jet dinosaur. And this guy, Sky Lynx, like all of the stuff that he told Optimus was not really important. Like, Optimus already knew all the things that he was dealing with. It was just kind of like, okay, we need to make Optimus dumb, so we need to also have him have a situation where he gets back on the saddle. And that's what Sky Lynx was there for. He could have removed him completely and it would have made no difference. The part with Ratchet's clinic, because Ratchet is an Autobot, but he defected from Optimus. He's mostly just wanting to heal people. It doesn't matter who they are and where they're from and what faction they follow. A lot of stuff that happened in Ratchet's clinic is really irrelevant. They could have condensed that a lot more and developed Ratchet's character in other ways, because at the end of the day, they kind of just left him on the wayside. He was only necessary for 2 things in the storyline, right? And then the Quintesson was really interesting, but it took too long to get through what a Quintesson was. So it was kind of annoying, because it's like, okay, I'm really interested in this thing, but I also don't care too much about what it's saying. So can we move along, right? And if they would have condensed those things a bit and spread out the development between Megatron and Optimus a little bit more in Earthrise, I think Kingdom would have been even stronger than it was, and Siege would have seemed a lot better as well. Because I think Siege and Earthrise are basically the same storyline, and then it ends, and then Kingdom starts, right? But I think that they could have done a better job at combining them a little bit more. So, yeah, that's overall my review of each section. I actually really enjoyed it. At the end of the day, it was new Transformers content I had never seen. It was really interesting. It was really cool to see all of the designs in the old style, but with a modern twist to them. I really liked Optimus Prime a lot. Bumblebee was cool. I really liked his little, double horns that he has. Alita and RC were interesting. I liked Megatron a lot. Jetfire was cool. Starscream was Starscream. Soundwave and the other guy, what was his name? I don't know, the other bad guy that's like the guy that supports Megatron. I really liked them as well. Overall, it was just really good in terms of the characters. However, the kind of story was a little bit lackluster sometimes. So, yeah, overall, it was good. It was my favorite, though, but it was still enjoyable. So, that's kind of my point of view on Transformers War for Cybertron, specifically the War for Cybertron Trilogy. So, there you go. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know your thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.